Real power is not about open confrontation, but silent destruction. Most people think power is loud, armies clashing voices, raised fists flying. But true power, it's almost invisible. It doesn't shout, it whispers. In the game of power, open. Confrontation is a mistake only the naive make. When you attack your enemy directly, you declare yourself. You give them time to prepare, to resist, to retaliate. Victory becomes costly, messy, uncertain. The real masters move differently. They don't throw punches, they pull strings. They understand that the greatest victories happen when the enemy doesn't even realize they're being destroyed until it's too late to stop it. Instead of facing their rivals head-on, they corrupt them quietly. They plant seeds of doubt. They feed egos and vanity. They create fractures within alliances, spreading invisible cracks until the whole foundation collapses under its own weight. And when the collapse comes, it appears natural, inevitable, not an act of war, but of fate itself. Machiavelli understood this brutal truth. In power, there is no glory in open battle, only exposure and risk. The strong win not by fighting harder, but by fighting smarter, by never letting themselves be seen as the cause of the downfall. The world doesn't belong to those who fight openly. It belongs to those who move silently, striking through influence, decay, and misdirection. Because real power isn't about defeating an enemy face to face. It's about making them defeat themselves while you stand untouched, unseen, unstoppable. True power does not announce itself. It moves beneath the surface, shaping decisions, changing loyalties, shifting outcomes, all without drawing attention. Influence that is visible is influence that attracts enemies. The moment you show your hand, you provoke defenses. You awaken resistance. You trigger the survival instincts of those who could have been quietly manipulated. A true master of power understands that visibility is a liability. Power must be like gravity, unseen but undeniable. Its effects must be felt, not witnessed. Machiavelli knew that the more visible your strength, the more you invite opposition. The more silent your movements, the easier it is to dismantle your enemies before they even realize the battle has begun. When you operate invisibly, you erode confidence, spread confusion, and destabilize alliances, all without ever being named as the cause. You become a ghost in the minds of your rivals, present everywhere. Yet untouchable, think of the forces that shape history. They do not arrive with a trumpet's blare. They seep in quietly, changing minds, rewriting loyalties until the old structures crumble without a single visible blow. That is how influence must operate, to be felt without being seen, to shape events without taking credit, to control outcomes without standing in the spotlight. Visible power is loud, predictable, and easy to counter. Invisible influence is quiet, unpredictable, and almost impossible to fight. Those who understand this move through the world like a hidden current. Invisible but unstoppable, in the game of power, it is not the loudest who dominate it, it is the quiet architects behind the scenes who truly rule. The battlefield of true power is not the body, it is the mind. Physical attacks are blunt instruments. They draw blood, they make noise, they demand retaliation. But psychological warfare is quieter, more devastating, and far more enduring. A wounded body can heal, a shattered mind rarely does. True masters of power understand this. They do not seek to defeat their enemies by sheer force. They aim to dismantle their certainty, to fracture their confidence, to poison their decision-making. One seed of doubt planted carefully can cripple an entire strategy. One whisper of fear can erode even the strongest loyalty. Where physical violence invites open war, psychological warfare invites collapse from within. It does not force the enemy to surrender. It makes them surrender to themselves. It is the art of making someone question everything they once trusted, their instincts, their allies, their own worth. And when the mind collapses, the body follows without resistance. Machiavelli and Sun Tzu alike understood that the greatest victories are not won by outmuscling an opponent, but by unbalancing them so profoundly they destroy their own position. You don't need to swing a sword, if you can make your rival lay it down voluntarily. In the modern world, from corporate boardrooms to political stages, the most ruthless players win, not by confrontation but by manipulation, using perception, doubt, rumor, and silence as their weapons. Physical attacks create martyrs. Psychological attacks create ruins. In the game of power, it is not the strongest who survive, but the most invisible. Architects of doubt, those who understand this move like shadows across the minds of their rivals, leaving confusion, hesitation, and inevitable collapse in their wake. True destruction does not come from direct blows. It rises from silent subversion, the invisible corrosion that rots a rival's foundations long before they realize the danger. You do not need to attack openly. You only need to plant questions, doubts and fears deep inside their structures. Silent subversion is the art of letting your enemies dismantle themselves. A careless rumor here, a whispered suspicion there. Over time, these small seeds grow into thorns that tear alliances apart. Leaders begin to question their advisors. Teams turn against each other. Friends become threats. Trust. The backbone of all power erodes silently until nothing remains. Machiavelli understood that a kingdom falls faster when it fractures from within than when it is attacked from outside. Open conflict only strengthens loyalty. Silent decay hollows it out. The rival who once stood tall becomes isolated, confused, weakened not by your hand, but by their own crumbling support. There is no trail leading back to you. No visible attack to defend against, only a slow, suffocating collapse. True masters of power use this method precisely because it is so undetectable. They move beneath the surface, shifting loyalties, feeding resentments, encouraging mistakes. Every misstep looks like it was their target's own decision. Every downfall appears inevitable. Silent subversion is not just a tactic. It is a philosophy. Why fight a battle when you can make your opponent destroy their own army? Why break a door when you can rot the hinges and watch it fall under its own weight? In the world of power, the greatest triumphs are won. Not by force, but by corrosion. The strongest enemy is powerless when they are fighting ghosts. Ghosts you created. Isolation is not just loneliness, it is annihilation. In the realm of power, no enemy is ever truly defeated until they are isolated, cut off from their allies, stripped of their influence, left alone to drown in their own fear. Isolation is the silent killer, the weapon that strikes at the very heart of strength, the network of trust and support that every powerful figure relies on. A single leader, no matter how brilliant, is powerless without followers. A king without loyal knights is just a man in a crown. That is why true masters of power do not always attack the leader directly. They attack the web around them. They sow discord among advisors, ignite jealousy among friends, whisper doubts into the ears of key supporters. Little by little, the foundation cracks, alliances fracture, faith erodes. And the leader finds themselves standing on hollow ground, commanding an army that no longer listens. By the time they realize they are alone, the war is already lost. Machiavelli warned that it is not enemies who destroy a ruler, it is abandoned allies. Isolation robs a person of their confidence, their judgment, and ultimately their will to act. It leaves them exposed, desperate, paralyzed. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its subtlety. No battle is fought, no blood is spilled, the target destroys themselves by the very absence of others. The collapse appears natural, inevitable. In the art of silent domination, isolation is the most devastating strike because it doesn't just break the body or reputation. It breaks the soul, and once the soul is broken, there is no recovery. History offers brutal lessons for those who seek power without understanding its fragile foundations. Maximilien Robespierre, once the fiery heart of the French Revolution, learned this too late. At the peak of his influence, Robespierre was feared, respected, almost untouchable, but he made one fatal mistake. He isolated himself. In his pursuit of an ideal republic, he sowed distrust even among his own allies. He accused, he purged, he demanded purity where only loyalty could have sustained him. Slowly, the very men who had once lifted him to power began to turn. Whispers spread through the national convention. Rumors of his ambition, his secret lists, his hunger for control grew louder. Yet Robespierre, blind to the growing void around him, pushed harder. When the final blow came, it was not from an enemy across the battlefield, it came from within his own circle. The same voices that once cheered his rise now condemned him to death. There was no great battle, no heroic stand, only a man alone, dragged before the guillotine, by the hands that once crowned him a leader. Robespierre's fall is not just a story of political betrayal. It is a perfect case study in the deadliness of isolation. Power does not collapse with a loud explosion. It withers quietly as support evaporates. By the time Robespierre realized he was alone, there was no redemption, no negotiation, no escape. In the ruthless game of power, your greatest threat is not the enemy you can see. It is the silence of the allies who are no longer there, and when the silence grows loud enough, your downfall is already complete. Maximilien Robespierre did not fall because he lacked intelligence or ambition. He fell because he misunderstood the real nature of power, that survival is not built on fear alone, but on the invisible loyalty of others. At the height of the French Revolution, Robespierre was a force to be reckoned with, a master of rhetoric, a symbol of revolutionary justice. Yet with every purge, every accusation, he unknowingly chipped away at the very foundation that supported him. His allies grew fearful, his friends became suspicious. And without realizing it, Robespierre stood increasingly alone. Power is not maintained by force. It is maintained by perception, when those around you no longer believe you can protect them, or worse, when they fear you more than they trust you. Your reign ends not with a battle, but with a quiet, devastating collapse. Robespierre's isolation was not the result of a single betrayal. It was death by 1,000 cuts, a whispered doubt here, a nervous glance there, until his former comrades no longer saw a leader but a threat. When the moment came, there was no army to defend him, no loyalists willing to risk their necks. The hands that once applauded him now signed his death warrant. The guillotine that had silenced his enemies now silenced him. His downfall is a brutal reminder in the art of power. Isolation is the deadliest wound of all. Betrayal does not need a dagger. It only needs silence, hesitation, and abandonment. And once you are alone, no amount of strength, brilliance, or past glory can save you. The true battlefield is not found in armies clashing or bullets flying. It lies deep within the human mind. Physical attacks wound the body, but psychological corrosion dismantles the soul. It is slow, silent, almost imperceptible at first, but over time it hollows out. Confidence erodes judgment and leaves even the strongest figures paralyzed by doubt. Masters of power understand that the mind is the most fragile fortress. You do not need to breach the walls. You simply need to plant doubt and let time do the rest. A leader who once made bold, decisive moves now hesitates. A rival who once stood proudly now second-guesses every step. Small cracks widen into gaping fractures. Where there was certainty, confusion spreads like wildfire. Once a person loses trust in their own instincts, they become their own worst enemy. This is the essence of psychological warfare. You do not break your opponent through force. You let them break themselves from the inside. Every mistake they make becomes amplified. Every hesitation multiplies. And by the time they realize what is happening, their strength is gone. Machiavelli, Nietzsche, and Sun Tzu all understood this silent war. They taught that the clever strategist attacks perception, not position, attacks belief, not armor. In modern times, this method is even more potent. A single rumor, a strategic whisper, a manufactured crisis of self-confidence can unravel an empire faster than any army. Psychological corrosion is patient. It is surgical, and it is devastating. Once the mind collapses, no army, no fortune, no reputation can rebuild it in time. In the game of power, the real victory is not making your rival surrender. It is making them surrender to their own fear. Every human carries hidden cracks within their armor, small, often invisible, but devastating when touched with precision. The wise strategist knows that brute force is clumsy. True mastery lies in exploiting the weaknesses already present inside the rival's mind. Vanity and fear are two of the most potent weapons. Vanity blinds. It makes a person overconfident, reckless, desperate for validation. By feeding their pride carefully with flattery, with subtle encouragement, you can push them into decisions they believe are brilliant but are fatally flawed. They will walk willingly into traps of their own, convinced they are invincible, and when they fall, they will have no one to blame but themselves. Fear, on the other hand, corrodes from within. It paralyzes ambition. It clouds judgment. It fractures loyalty. A small seed of fear planted at the right moment can cause a rival to hesitate, second-guess retreat. Fear turns strong men into cautious cowards, makes leaders abandon bold moves for desperate compromises. True power is not about creating fear through threats. It is about making fear seem like it was born inside them, organic and uncontrollable. The rival thinks they are protecting themselves when in fact they are dismantling their own future. Machiavelli knew this well. He understood that men are governed more by their passions than by reason. The goal is not to conquer them by force, but to steer their vanity and fear like a captain steering a ship into a storm. If you can make a man worship his own image and dread his own downfall, you never have to raise a sword. He will destroy himself while believing he is saving himself. In the art of power, the enemy's mind is the battlefield, and their weaknesses are your arsenal. In today's world, the battlefield has simply changed shape. Wars are no longer fought with swords and armies. They are fought in boardrooms through whispers, in political chambers, across the invisible lines of influence and perception. The silent warfare of modern power is far more lethal because it leaves no visible scars, only broken careers, collapsed companies, and ruined reputations. Corporate giants do not openly attack their competitors. They acquire them, starve them of resources, flood the market with cheaper alternatives, or bury them in endless legal battles. All of it happens behind closed doors, far from the public eye. Yet the devastation is complete. In politics, true, players do not shout their ambitions. They craft narratives, they plant seeds of doubt, both in the minds of the public and among rivals' closest allies. A subtle rumor, an anonymous leak, a shift in public opinion carefully orchestrated. These are the tools of silent domination. The most brilliant political assassins never draw a sword. They draw suspicion, uncertainty, division. When a leader falls today, it is rarely through open revolt. It is through isolation, through 1,000 tiny betrayals quietly fed by invisible hands. This is the Machiavellian game at its highest level, to move the world without leaving fingerprints, to destroy threats without ever being named. Power today belongs not to the loud but to the invisible architects who understand perception, patience, and precision. In the corporate world, in government halls, even in personal ambition, the ones who win are not the ones who fight harder, but the ones who manipulate the battlefield itself until victory is inevitable. Silent warfare is not the future, it is the present, and only those who master it will survive. The highest form of victory is the one that requires no battle at all. True power is not measured by how many enemies you defeat in combat. It is measured by how effortlessly you render them powerless without drawing a sword. Sun Tzu, the master strategist, taught that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. In the modern world, this lesson is more vital than ever. Open conflict is costly. It exposes vulnerabilities, invites counterattacks, and breeds new enemies. But victory achieved without confrontation leaves no scars, no trails of resentment, only silence and dominance. True masters of power reshape the battlefield so completely that their rivals have no choice but to concede. They manipulate perceptions, reframe narratives, create conditions so unfavorable that resistance becomes impossible. Sometimes the enemy believes surrender was their own idea. Sometimes they never even realize they lost until it is too late to fight back. This is not weakness. It is a higher form of control. It demands patience, emotional discipline, and the ability to move invisibly. Like a shadow behind the scenes, to win without fighting is to dominate, not just actions but minds. It is to anticipate every move close, every escape route, and leave the enemy isolated in a cage they helped build for themselves in business, politics, and even personal ambition. Those who rise to the top are rarely the ones who fought the hardest. They are the ones who fought the least because they understood that real conquest is achieved not through force, but through inevitability. Victory without fighting is not simply a strategy. It is the mark of true supremacy. And those who master it hold a power that no army can challenge. In the modern battlefield of business, the most powerful empires are not built through open war. They are built through silent suffocation. Look closely at the world of technology, and you will see that the giants do not destroy their rivals with public confrontation. They crush them quietly, systematically, with precision. When a promising startup threatens a major corporation, the giant does not rush to attack. Instead, it moves silently. Sometimes it acquires the startup under the guise of partnership only to dismantle it from within. Sometimes it buys critical patents, locking the startup out of its own future innovations. Sometimes it releases similar products for free, flooding the market and starving the newcomer of customers until they suffocate under financial pressure. There are no dramatic battles, no headlines announcing a corporate kill, only a slow fading and invisible execution carried out with surgical coldness. Tech moguls understand what Machiavelli once taught. If you must crush a rival, you must crush them completely, leaving no hope of recovery. Silent warfare in business is even more brutal because it often disguises itself as opportunity. A friendly offer, a collaborative project, a sudden shift in market conditions. By the time the startup realizes it has been cornered, its resources are depleted, its momentum is lost, and its investors are fleeing. In Silicon Valley, the carcasses of brilliant ideas litter the path of giants who knew how to win without appearing to fight. This is the new art of war, quiet, relentless, and devastating. True power does not announce itself with explosions. It closes in silently, suffocates the competition, and emerges without a scratch. The battlefield has changed, but the law of domination remains the same: conquer without mercy and leave no chance for resurrection. True power has never belonged to those who shout the loudest or strike the hardest. It belongs to those who master the shadows. In every age, the real architects of history have been the ones who understood that domination is not won by grand displays, but by invisible influence. Power in its purest form is unseen. It reshapes alliances without anyone realizing it, collapses empires without a single public blow. It rewires human behavior without leaving fingerprints. The world's greatest victories were not declared with fanfare. They unfolded quietly while everyone else was still playing yesterday's game. In the modern world of endless noise, headlines, protests, surface-level battles, it is easy to mistake visibility for strength, but visibility is vulnerability. Every move you show becomes a move they can counter. Every word you speak becomes a weapon that can be turned against you. That is why true power operates differently. It whispers through closed doors. It plants doubts instead of launching attacks. It manipulates realities without ever having to defend them. It builds its empire in silence, brick by brick, while others exhaust themselves, fighting shadows they cannot see. When you understand this, you realize that real power is not something you claim. It is something you become. You do not need to announce your dominance. Your rivals will feel it as the ground shifts beneath them. The next time you move, move without noise, influence without being noticed. Conquer without drawing a sword, because in the end, the world does not belong to those who demand to be seen. It belongs to those who rule from the shadows. In a world obsessed with noise, real power moves in silence. The greatest victories are not won through open confrontation or public battles. They are secured by those who understand the art of subtlety, patience, and invisible influence. True strength lies not in reacting to every slight, but in mastering your emotions, manipulating environments quietly, and letting rivals destroy themselves. Psychological warfare. Planting doubt, eroding trust, isolating threats is far more devastating than any direct attack. It is not about fighting harder, it is about fighting smarter. Power is maintained by those who resist the need for recognition, who pull the strings behind the scenes, while others exhaust themselves trying to be seen. In business, politics, and personal ambition, victory belongs to those who control perception without ever exposing themselves. Instead of seeking revenge, seek strategic advantage. Instead of exposing your moves, conceal your intentions. Instead of confronting enemies head-on, create the conditions where they defeat themselves. Every move should be quiet, deliberate, inevitable. Remember, in the modern world, the battlefield is the mind, and those who understand how to corrode confidence, shift loyalty, and isolate threats without raising alarms are the ones who thrive. Power does not announce itself. It is felt. If you wish to rise without being targeted, influence without being exposed, and win without unnecessary battle, learn to master the shadows. Because in the end, the world does not reward the loud. It rewards the invisible strategist who shapes the game without ever appearing to play it.